Today's daf is daf Lamed Vav, and we're talking about the sheet of Isi ben Yehuda, which was mentioned on Lamed Hayamid Beis, to the effect that women are exempt from the lav of Baal Yikrachu, meaning Karcha. And we're trying to figure out the reasoning for Isi. And one approach was that in the parsha of Gedida, it says Bonim Atem, and we dash in a miyud of Bonim v'lo Banos. And Isi ben Yehuda equates Gedida with Karcha. And now we have Abaye. Abaye Amar Hainu Taimidi Isi. I'm going to offer an alternative explanation for the basis of Isi's conclusion. The Gomar, he learns Gzeira Shava in the pasuk in Parshas Re'eh. It says Lo tasimu karcha bein einecha, and with regard to the Kohanim in Parshas Emor, it says Lo yikachu karcha v'rosham. So we're going to derive the din of Yisrael from the pasuk B'nei Aaron, Malahalan, just like in the Easter that is formulated for Kohanim Nashim Pturos, because the Torah opens up in Parshas Emor LaKohanim B'nei Aaron, which excludes Benos Aaron, Afkan. Here too in the Easter of a Yisrael, it says that Nashim Pturos, just like they're Pturos in the Easter of Kohanim. And that's based on B'nei Aaron, V'lo Benos Aaron. So the Gemara immediately asks, V'is viralon, if on the basis of Abaye's explanation, T'chi ksiv kra b'kulin yonahu d'ksiv, that the opening pasuk in Parshas Emor B'nei Aaron to exclude Benos Aaron is now b'kulin yonahu d'ksiv. In other words, that miyut reflects on the entire parsha and all the dinim therein, not just on Tumas Mes. Is a nishtok kramine. Why did the Torah need the Gzeira Shav of Karcha? V'teisi b'kal v'chomer. We could have exempted women from the Easter Karcha with the Kal v'chomer. V'anamina. What would the Kal v'chomer read? Ma konim should be bohem hakos of mitzvos yiseros. The Torah is more machmer with regard to a Kohen than with regard to Yisrael, and nevertheless, B'nei Aaron, only the male members of the Kahuna are prohibited from Karcha, V'lo Benos Aaron, but not the women folk than Yisrael, Lo Kolshken, where with regard to B'nei Yisrael, to the exclusion of Kohanim, there's no Riba B'hen Mitzvos Yiseros, so the Torah is more Mekil, and it's a low level of Kedusha with regard to Yisrael, is Lo Kolshken, how much more so that the Easter Karcha would not be Noeg in Benos Yisrael. If it's not Noeg in Benos Aaron, then for sure it's not Noeg in Benos Yisrael. So why do you have a need, according to Abaye's explanation of Isa ben Yehuda, for the Gzeira Shav of Karcha? Dalmi habi tepaklei b'mishum kal v'chomer. So Gemara answers, Ilav Gzeira Shav. If we didn't have the Gzeira Shav, Hava Mina, we might have thought that when it says B'nei Aaron, V'lo Benos Aaron, that's only referring to the Easter of Tumah Lemes. Shekain, and the reason for that is that the miyut of V'lo Benos Aaron is Hifzika Inyan. Right, after it says Lo Yitama, then it goes back to Karcha. And therefore the Lo Yitama would be a Hefzik. And the mitzvah of Lo Yitama, that Kohanim are commanded to be Metame L'Mesim, for example, Aviv, Imo, Beno, Bito, Echav, Achiv Achoso. Included in that mitzvah is the Avelus for every single Yisrael for a Krovim that passed away. And that mitzvah of Ibul, of Avelus, is Noeg, Bechol Makom, Bechol Zman, Bechol Adam, Bein Kohen, Bein Yisrael, B'scharim, U'b'nekevos. And anyone who violates that Isur is mevatel, anyone who doesn't violate that Isur is mevatel mitzvah. If he's not misabel, then he has forfeited a mitzvah. And the chinuch points out that a woman is not mitzuva litame lekrovim, even though she is included in ibul, but the tuma, which means the desecration of kedushas kahuna as part of avelus, that dimension does not apply to a bas kohen, meaning that's only bnei kohen, below bas kohen, and that's called hifsika inyan. But now we have Gzeira Shava, and Gzeira Shava is going to tell you that we should derive from Benos Aaron, and that miut from Bnei Aaron to exclude Benos Aaron, even with regard to the Yisur Karcha. And therefore, even in the case of Yisur Elis, she's excluded, and do not apply the principle of Hifzik Ha'inyan. So Gemara rejects this. Hashta Nami, even after the Gzeira Shava of Karcha, Nema Hifzik Ha'inyan. We could still apply the principle of Hifzik Ha'inyan with Lo Yitama, and the Benos Aaron would not be excluded from the Azara of Karcha. Imishum Gzeira Shava. So he'll ask me, so what does the Gzeira Shava teach me? And the Gemara answers, Mi boile, we would need it for a different halacha, Kedusanya, the Isur Karcha, and exactly how you violate the Isur Karcha. And if you recall, we discussed the case where he could violate multiple karchas at one time by putting his hand and balding 5 spots on his head simultaneously. And since in the Parsha of Kohanim, in Emor it says, Lo yikruchu karcha barosham, and the word karcha was superfluous, why did the Torah add the word karcha? And the answer is, Yochel, I might think, afilu karach arba v'chamesh krichos, lo yechai v'la achas. Maybe if he does 5 different bald spots at the same time, he's only going to be chayiv for one set of malchus, for one avera. Talmud lomer karcha, to teach me l'chayiv al kol achas v'yachas. And therefore, even after you have the Gzeira Shava, argues the Gemara against the Bayit, we still could apply the principle of Hifzik Ha'inyan. And there's no exclusion of Benos Aaron from the Azar of Karcha. And if you'll ask me, so what do we do with the Gzeira Shava? The Gzeira Shava is coming to teach me halacha in the Tzuras Maisa Machayev of Karcha. Furthermore, Berosham Ma Talmud Lomar. Why did the Torah have to add the word Berosham? Lo Yikruchu Karcha Berosham. Lefisha Nemar, because it says in Parshas Re'eh, it says Lo Tizkor Lo Tasima Karcha B'nei Nechem. La Meis is Yachal, I might think, Lo Yehei Chayev Ella Al B'nei Nechem. So it means that underneath the forehead, between the 2 eyes, if you have hairs, there's an Isur Karcha on those hairs on the forehead. Minayin, how do we know L'Rabbos Kol Rosh that anywhere in the head generates an Isur of Karcha? Talmud Lomer Berosham L'Chayev Al Rosh K'Beinei Nayim. That anywhere in the head is Chayev like the hair of Beinei Nayim. The Brisa continues to explain V'Einli. I only know that it was Chayev from the Riba of Karcha or from the Riba of Rosham El Kohanim, because the Parsha is addressing Kohanim and not Yisraelim. Shariba Behena Kosu Mitzvus Yiseros. And I could apply the logic that the reason why the Torah singles out Kohanim for the Isur Lav of Karcha is because the Torah in general adds many Isurim and Mitzvos to Kohanim. And they are sanctified with a high level of Kiddushin. So Yisrael B'nai, how do we know that these halachas apply even to Yisrael? The Brisa derives it from Gzeira Shava. Nemar Kan, it says, Lo Yirkachu Karcha Barosham. In the case of Yisrael, that was Kohen. Case of Yisrael, it says, Lo Tasima Karcha B'nei Nechem Lames. Ma Kan, in the case of Kohanim, Chayav Al Kol Karcha V'Karcha. He does 5 karchas at once, he's chayav 5. V'chayiv al harosh k'bein hanayim, even on the hairs of the head, not just on the forehead. Is afla halon, so to be Israel. Chayiv al kol korcha v'korcha v'chayiv al harosh k'bein hanayim. And furthermore, the Gzeira Shava teaches me one other halacha, malahalan al mes. When do you violate Isur Karcha? That's only as a manifestation of grief and mourning over the dead. Afkan, so to the Kohanim, Dafka, when he does the Karcha al mes, then he violates the Isur. So since the Gzeira Shava is necessary to teach me the halachas of Karcha, then we don't have Abai's answer that we need the Gzeira Shava to teach me that Benos Aaron are not included in Isur Karcha. And the Gemara answers in Cain, I'm going to tell you that we derive two different sets of halachas from the Gzeira Shava. If, as the Makshan would insist, the Gzeira Shava is only coming to teach you the specific halachas of the Isur Karcha, is Nichtov Kra, the Torah could have just said, Lo Yikuchu Kerach B'Rosham, without the extra hay of Karcha. And we say, not only by Kohen, but also by Yisrael, it says, Lo Tasimu Kerach B'nei Nechen. And the Torah actually drops the hay. No, I'm sorry. And the Torah could have dropped the hay. Is my Karcha. So why did the Torah add the hay? Shamet Mina. We're going to derive from that Tartan. That there are two derivations from this Gzeira Shava. Number one, that you chayav on each and every Karcha, that you chayav on any hair anywhere in the head, and that you're only chayav in Karcha for mes. And on top to boot, that it only applies to males and not to females. All this is Abai. Rava Amar Hainu Taima de Isi. What was the logic of Isi? So now we have a third explanation for Isi, who excludes the Isur Karcha with regard to women. The Yolif Beinei Nechem Mitfilin. Isi has a Gzeira Shava from which he derives an equation between Tfilin and Karcha. Because with regard to Isur Karcha, it says Beinei Nechem. With regard to Tfilin, Beinei Nechem, Ma'alahal, just like in the mitzvah of Tfilin, Noshim Pturos, as we derive from Talmud Torah, V'shinatum levanecha v'lo levanosecha, Afkan, so too in the Isur Karcha, Noshim Pturos. So it's a totally different Gzeira Shava. Frek the Gemara for Rava, my time alo Omar Kabai. Why wasn't Rava satisfied to exclude the women from Karcha by virtue of the Miyut B'nei Aaron v'lo B'nos Aaron? And the Gemara answers, Kerach Karcha lo mashmalin. We said that Abaye has to derive from the extra hay of Karcha. And Rava didn't have that digduk. He was of the opinion that it's not a redundant hay if the Torah added to Karach Karcha. And therefore we don't have a drasha from Karcha. All we have is a Gzeira Shava. And that Gzeira Shava could only teach us what is included under the Isur Karcha, but it cannot teach us that women are excluded. So now the Gemara asks the opposite question. Abaye, my time aloma karova. What bothered Abaye about? Why did he object to the Gzeira Shava Beinei Nechem? Which would tell me that just like women are exempt from tefillin, so too they're exempt from the Isur Karcha. Amalacha, Abaye would answer, tefillin gufayu mehach gomerla. Even the din of tefillin itself, the fact that tefillin is worn begova shel rosh, and it's not on the metzach, below the hairline, but on the forehead above, on the top of the head above the hairline. That's derived from this Gzeira Shava in the following way. Ma'ala halon. Just like in the case of karcha, when it says beinei nechem, limmakom she'osim karcham, where do you normally make a bald spot? That's in a place where hair normally grows, not on the forehead, but on the top of the head, begovo shel rosh, above the forehead. So it doesn't mean beinei nayim mamish, between the eyes, but rather the makom seir on the top of the head, begovo shel rosh. Is afkan here too beinei nechem. With regard to hanochas tefillin, is makom hanocha begovo rosh. So it's interesting, the halacha of tefillin shel rosh and where exactly you're supposed to wear it is derived from karcha, from the Iser karcha. And that's the import of the Gzeir Shava beinei nechem. So the Gemara asks now, bein la Abayu, bein la Rava. Now that we have both Abayi's explanation and Rava's explanation of the opinion of Isi that women are exempt from whichever Gzeir Shava you chase, but not from Bonim Atem Lashem Elokechem, which is the beginning of the pasuk in the Iser Karcha. Frek the Gemara, Hi Bonim Atem, my Darshibe. What will Abai and Rava do with the extra words Bonim Atem? More answers. We need the Bonim Atem for the following price, which has to do with God's love for Klal Yisrael. Bonim Atem Lashem Elokechem Bizman Shatem Noagim Minag Bonim Atem Kruyim Bonim. This is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. We'll soon see Rabbi Meir dissents. We are only worthy of the description, the adjective of Bonim, if we are Minag Noag Minag Bonim. But Iatem Noagim Minag Bonim, if Chas v'Sholom we don't fulfill the will of God, then Einatem Kruyim Bonim, we forfeit our status as Bonim Divrei Rabbi Meir. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir disagrees fundamentally. Bein kach atem kriyim bonim. I have a pasuk in Tanakh to prove that we are always eternally considered bonim, and God will relate to us the way a father to a son, even in a case of ein atem noagim minig bonim. And there are many psukim that could testify to the fact that even when we're not noeg kishura, nevertheless we are considered bonim. Shenemar, first the pasuk in Yirmiyah, and what does it say in Yirmiyah? Bonim schalim hema was still called bonim. V'yomer, and now another pasuk at the end of the Chumash it says bonim lo uman bom. V'yomer, a third pasuk in Yeshayahu Hanavi, zera mereim bonim mashchisim. So even though in mashchisim was still called bonim, and a fourth pasuk from Hosea, v'hoya bimkom asher ye'emar lehem lo amiatem ye'emar lehem bnei kel chai. Now the Gemara wants to know, why do we need all these psukim? My vi omer b'chi tema. If you only had that pasuk of bonim sichlim hema b'chi tema, you might argue schale, you're lacking das, and you're doing stupid things. Okay, but you're not really violating the word of God. I mean, you do some stupidities. Chaser das, that's called sichli. Then bonim scholim, who to make body? You still have rights to be considered bonim, even if you do stupid things without das. But ki les behem nusayu, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu encounters and becomes aware, if you can, of all the rishus, and there's no trust in the Jewish people or mikri bani, then you forfeit your status of bani. Tashma, now I need another pasuk. V'omer banim lo uman bam. Means even when you're not reliable, that's called lo uman bam, you're still called banim. V'chi teiman, if you'll insist, ki lesbe hem nusa, who the mikri banim. Okay, we went down one level. Your actions and misdeeds indicate that we cannot rely on you. No imun. But nevertheless, you didn't go all far out to worship an idol. So who the mikri banim? Now the Torah considers you banim, no matter how low you reached on the scale. But when you get to the bottom barrel, you worship idols, low mikri banim, then for sure you have gone way beyond lo uman bam, and you forfeited your status as banim toshma. Now we get to the third possibility. Zera mereim banim mashchisim. Mashchisim means that you are guilty of the avera of avodah zarah, which is called hashchasa, as it says in the pasuk pen tashchisun vasisem lochem pesel at the beginning of Sefer Dvarim. But nevertheless, there's even a lower level than that. Who could believe it? The chi tema. Maybe you'll tell me that, okay, even those who worship idols are still called banim, but banim ashchisim hu de mikre banim, those who worship avodah zarah, are considered banim, but b'nei ma'alya lo mikri. They don't have any positive appellation. Okay, they're still called banim, but that's basic. The Omer, and now we have another pasuk. V'haya b'mkom asher yomer lehem, which means tachas asher haya nemar lehem. Lo ami ata. On the one hand, you're no longer my people, my nation, because you worship avodah zarah. But ye omer lahem, we still call them b'nei kel chai. You still have the chashivus of banim. You have the chavivus above and beyond any nation. You are muchtar b'mailas banim atem l'Hashem Elokeichem. This leads us to the Mishnah on the bottom of Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. The Mishnah is going to give us a long list of mitzvahs that apply only to men and not to women, and it's mostly dinei karbanos. Hasmichos, right? Smicha bailim on the korban before shchita. Tnufos, which means hanafas karbanos and certain karbanos. Hagoshos, which means mincha, that's brought to the Keren HaMizbeach. Kmitzos, which is kmitza min mincha, v'aktoros, and the burning of karbanos on the Mizbeach. Vehamalikos, or malika in the case of an oath. Hakabolos, receiving the gan. Hazos, sprinkling the dam. All the above are nogim ba'noshim v'lo b'noshim, which means that noshim enam sobchos al korbanosem, enam minifos es minchasa, and even if they were born to a kohen, nevertheless, enam magishos mincha v'kometzes mimena, enam aktiros umolkos umakabel sadam v'enam mazos. But there are two exceptions to this rule. Chutz mi minchas sota and minchas nezira shehein menifos osan biatzma. So there is tenufa with regard to women in two cases, in minchas sota and nezira. And now we get to the Gemara. The Gemara wants to know, how do we derive these conclusions? Smichus, how do we know that women are excluded from smicha? D'chsiv, it says at the beginning of the Parasha Karbanos in Vayikra Aleph, Daber B'nei Yisrael. And afterwards, in the very beginning of Sefer Dvarim, it says, of Vayikra, it says, V'samach yodo al rosh ha'olah. And it sounds like it's B'nei Yisrael who are mentioned at the beginning of the Parasha Somchim, V'yein B'nos Yisrael Somchos. So at the beginning of the parasha, it says Daber B'nei Yisrael, which implies the male members of Israel, and then it says V'samach Yodo Rosh HaOlah, going back to B'nei Yisrael. That who does smicha? It's B'nei Yisrael, but not B'nos Yisrael. What about Tnufa? Daber el Bnei Yisrael. Again, we're going back to Sefer Vayikra Perek Zayin. In this case, it says Daber el Bnei Yisrael v'Heinif, and they will do. Bnei Yisrael will do the Tnufa. Is Bnei Yisrael manifim v'Ein Bnos Yisrael manifos. Hagoshos, even though she's a Kohenes, as we said earlier, she's not Ksherif Hagoshas HaMincha. Midechsiv, we derive this from the pasuk in the Parsha Menachos Vayikra Vav. V'zos Toras HaMincha Hakrev Osa B'nei Aaron v'lo B'nos Aaron. Kmitzos, how do we know that women are excluded from Kmitzah? Dechsiv in the Parsha V'akrovas Mincha, in the second chapter of Vayikra, it says Ve'hevi'ah el B'nei Aaron HaKohen v'kamatz. And the Torah added the words B'nei Aaron with regard to Kmitzah to exclude B'nos Aaron. How do we know that Haktoros are not implemented by Noshim? D'chsiv, with regard to the Haktoras Imurei Shlomim in Vayikra Gimel, it says V'ktiru Oso B'nei Aaron. And once again, the mir is B'nei Aaron v'lo B'nos Aaron, excluding women from Haktoros. Molikos, Yidechsiv, at the beginning of Vayikra, it says V'krivu HaKohen el Mizbech u'malak es rosho v'ktir ha-mizbecha. And in this pasuk, we have a hekesh between Malika and Aktorah, because it says u'malak es rosho v'hiktir. And that's going to teach me that just like Aktorah does not apply to B'nos Aaron, as we saw, so too Malika cannot be implemented by B'nos Aaron. What about Hakabolos? And Tichsiv, the Torah says, "V'shachar ben avakol l'fnei Hashem v'krivu b'nei Aaron hakohanim es hadam." So it says here at the beginning of Vayikra, Vikrivu. Vikrivu literally means that they bring the dam closer to the Mizbeach. But the Yomar Mar, we're going to interpret it according to, in light of a Bryce and Chagiga Yud Aleph, that this pasuk is not referring to Hakrava per se, but rather Likarev. And on the top of Lamed Vav Beis, V'krivu zo kabolas dam.